name is Natalie Deduck. I'm the Director of Operations and Finance for the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority, which, while being relatively new, has already received a few shout-outs today, so grateful for that. For those of you who do not know, CMDA is a new quasi-public state entity, and our aim is to invest or spur economic development throughout Connecticut's downtowns and transit hubs. We do so with our member municipalities in a variety of ways, offering technical support from zoning reform to permitting support to targeted investments in infrastructural needs and development projects. Greg is our first project to be able to invest in Enfield, which we're very excited about. So more than happy to be on this panel and moderating this conversation. So, I've been taking in all that we've been hearing today, and there's been such a focus on doing. I think Kristen said it so eloquently, progress belongs to the doers. And, there's many ways to implement a vision and to realize it, but I think one of the most critical partner in implementing these visions are our development partners. And not only are they an implementer, but what they're implementing will impact our built environment for generations. So I think it's important that we understand their perspective of what it takes to go into these developments. If there's things that people can learn, is how I'm hoping to drive the conversation. So let's get started. If each of these developers could introduce themselves and their background briefly, and then the project that you think kind of resonates with this audience, the Connecticut Main Street. Greg, we can start with you.
Sure. Hi. Good morning still, everyone. I'm Greg Vaca, the founder and president of GRAVA Properties. So I'm originally from Windsor, Connecticut, so grew up around Greater Hartford, went to New York and worked for a big global developer, Tishman Speyer, for about 15 years, helping run acquisitions and development in New York and then abroad, but came back to Greater Hartford really to use what I'd learned to redevelop main streets, in our village centers. So I started with my hometown of Windsor with Founders Square, which is 120 apartments and 12,000 square feet of retail on a formerly, tired, let's call it 50% leased strip mall, an old A&P in the center. We basically rebuilt the street wall where it was before the A&P came and demolished the whole neighborhood of the town center. And I think, for folks that go there today, it now is already seeming like it was always there, which is almost always the case with these types of developments. But, just to see occupying physical space where there was vacancy had an immediate effect. I mean, even as our tenants were setting up, our retail tenants, people were already crossing the street where they hadn't crossed in a while, walking by blocks that, people weren't walking by or hadn't been for a while. So it really is, these things are transformational to these communities. And it's been, sort of a dream of mine and a great, experience that I think others up here share. So very happy to be part of this panel and to be a part of this discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karmen Cheung. I'm the Regional Vice President for Pennrose for the New England region. And Pennrose is a 50-year-old development company that does mixed income housing all across the country. We're active in 19 states. And in addition to being a developer, we're also a long-term owner and have an affiliate property management company. We've developed about 27,000 units in that history. And in Connecticut South, we have about 1,000 units that are either completed or under development. And very excited to be here today because a lot of the developments that we've done in Connecticut have been centered in areas of transit, in areas that are downtowns, because those are the places that we want to be a part of. And one of the projects that is up here actually on the screen behind me is Torrington Riverfront, which is just a couple blocks down. You go down Main Street, make a left onto Franklin Street, and a lot of these are also formerly blighted or brownfield sites that have been remediated. I think in a lot of our downtowns in Connecticut, there are sites that haven't been touched in a long time because of that brownfield, and in collaboration with the city, we were able to get their support and to get that site remediated and redeveloped. And now we're working on potentially phase 2, but this building is 60 units with ground floor retail, and roof deck and greenway trail, and all those things were parts of what the city kind of originally envisioned as kind of components of the placemaking. So excited to talk more about that later.
I'm David Genovese, founder of Baywater Properties. I started as a banker in New York, like Greg. I was in New York City for about 12 years and made a decision in November of '01 to come back to my hometown in Darien, Connecticut. And my plan was to basically buy and renovate old office buildings and industrial buildings. I had no interest whatsoever in becoming a developer. I swore I would not do development. It's too risky, too many variables. And then I met the people from Connecticut Main Street who were brought in by the town of Darien, and some people laugh that Darien thought they needed Connecticut Main Street, but we really did. And I drank a lot of Main Street Kool-Aid, bathed in it sometimes, and started doing development in 2003, I guess it was. I built a couple of office buildings in Wilton, but then really got closer to the Main Street program as they were advising the town of Darien on how to fix its downtown, which had, if you can see from that upper right-hand photo, for you the right, that's what this block of Darien looked like in between an old Howard Johnson's and a Metro North train station right on a highway exit, 95 exit 11. And I built a mixed-use building and really tried to employ what I learned through Main Street. And when I was working with Main Street in Darien, I actually own no properties in Darien other than my house. But I sort of started seeing, and it wasn't why I got involved. I got involved as a volunteer. It wasn't why I got involved in the town's process with Main Street, but I started kind of seeing the potential of the town, and then made a mistake most developers don't make. I started developing in my hometown. Do you live in your hometown too? You do, right?
I'm from Windsor, so
yeah.
I didn't realize you were from there.
Yeah, which, is only not for the faint of heart. But we assembled after we built a 30,000-foot mixed-use building that worked out pretty well in 2007 and 8. I started assembling the 7-acre site, which took me about 13 years. If I look back at the financial model, I was right on the cost to acquire the property, pretty much right. Like, one person jammed me. He was waiting for the opportunity to be the last one to sell, as many of you have probably seen or heard that or experienced that yourselves. But I was totally wrong on the duration. I was young and optimistic. I thought it would take me like 5 years to figure this out. This is my 21st year working on it. And with Dave's help and his team's help, it's, I hope, my last year, because we hope to complete the project this year or early next. But, I started off candidly as sort of I would say, like, admittedly, like, spreadsheet developer. Like, what is the land cost? What's it going to cost to build this? What'll the rents be? But, and I really do credit a lot of this to Connecticut Main Street. And I say this to every group I talk to, not just because I'm here. I just got really into the placemaking and went deep on it, and really spent like the last 14 years focusing on creating this mix of tenancy and uses. The project has 100,000 feet of retail, 114 apartments, and you won't believe this, but 110,000 feet of office, which most people at most conferences I go to look at me like, are you insane to be building office in this environment? But it's 90% leased before it's completed. So I think we got a good location, and we learned a lot from Main Street and put it all to work.
Thank you. So just to provide some context, the slide behind us are, some of the projects that were just discussed right now. And my goal for the questions that I'm going to ask is to kind of have you walk us through the process of development, how you think about it, with some guided questions, with your lessons learned, the identified opportunities and challenges, and then what are your subsequent approaches? The goal of this panel is the developer's outlook. So what moving forward are you prioritizing? So to get things started, site and town. Now, it seems like there's some personal connections to why you pick the sites and towns that you do, but each one of you has invested in Connecticut Main Streets throughout the state, and we know that Connecticut Main Streets come in very many different shapes, sizes, needs, et cetera. So what are you looking for when you do a site selection and location? And particularly, what might be helpful to local leaders hoping to attract more development when you're doing those initial assessments? We can start with Greg again.
First, I'm not sure if you're being sincere in this developing in your hometown. I don't think there is anything better than building in your hometown. Do you agree? You don't agree with that?
No, I love it. I love it. I love it, but if you asked my wife, she would say it's a nightmare.
Okay.
Because if I go to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk, because we're out of milk on a Saturday morning, it takes me like 2 hours to get home. Because, 5 Mrs. Johnsons are approaching
That's Main
me.
Street, right? That's the whole Main Street
that's
ethos.
That's what it's about.
That's the whole Main Street ethos. No. So when I was at my former job, I really looked at new markets. So going into a place and saying, okay, where do we want to invest in this place? And so when I came to, back to Connecticut, I wanted to raise my family in Greater Hartford. I said, okay, I'm going to look at the zoning, at the politics, at all these things, put it in a matrix and see where I want to spend my time. And it was interesting because going into it, I thought, Greater Hartford, you're going to develop in West Hartford, you're going to develop in, some place that has, a lot of activity already. And it really pointed me in a different direction, which is where do folks really want this development? Because I kept seeing places that I would like to develop where a developer proposed something that I thought was great, and then it gets a decade of opposition, and I didn't have that kind of time. There was a few communities where I noticed that the zoning was liberalizing in the sense of allowing for more density, less parking, but also the politics was aligned around development, was pro-development. And, I'll just say, in these projects, you need a vision, and oftentimes the towns already have a vision, but it just needs to be implemented. And if you can go into a town that has a sense, like Windsor has, like some other towns have, many towns, in their documents, in their plans of conservation development and other documents, they know what they want. Tailoring a project to what the public wants and having the public give input, it creates a vision that is so powerful that then it pushes through naturally all the hurdles you will achieve. Because every week in this business is something shows up to demolish your hopes and dreams, and you have to push through that, right? And the only way you can do that is if you have a vision that is so compelling that all the stakeholders line up behind it. So just really quickly, in Windsor, we had to work with, I see Pat McMahon over there, set up a TIF district, avail ourselves of the tax increment financing rebate to lower the taxes to support the deal. We had to buy town and state land around it. We had to change the entitlements, the zoning, to have more density and less parking. We had to get a grant from the state. We won the CT Communities Challenge grant to support it. You have to do all these things, and if it's just something, if you're going to cut down some woods, right, in the suburbs, next to a bunch of angry people that don't want that there, like, that's not the recipe for getting that done on a reasonable timeline. And so really, having something that is aligned with what the town wants, you push through all those things, and all those things just became process. Even when hurdles came up to jeopardize the different stages, it was a process that you could always work through because everyone wanted you to get through it.
Yeah, so I think this will become a theme of what the three of us talk about, is that these projects take a long time, and these are projects that are best done in partnership with the city or the municipality or the town. Because there's no such thing as simple, easy development anymore. There's the clean sites are all gone, and everything has complexity to it. And having the partnership of the local leadership is really, really, really important. So I think when I'm looking at a new site, I think the first thing I do is I drive there. I'm like, okay, where would people want to go if they live here? I try to find, where would I eat? Where would I bring the kind of children to school? Or where are the amenities nearby to see where's the sense of place here? Because I was a renter myself until a few years ago, so that's kind of the mindset of, what is a renter going to be able to access around here? And then my next stop is really going to City Hall and trying to meet with either the economic development director or the mayor or the select board to get a sense of what their priorities are. Is this something that they want to see? Because unless you have that partnership, it is really hard to get any sort of development done, regardless of its kind of, if you're a certain multifamily scale, you need that strong partnership, and having infrastructure, water, sewer is also a key component that we look at early in the site selection. But for the Torrington kind of riverfront project, we got brownfield funding to remediate the site with the city. We had a tax fixing agreement, and for us, we also secured Urban Act grant as well as financing from Connecticut Housing Finance Agency and Department of Housing to build these units.
We will have a similar theme here. I mean, leadership in the community is so important because, I know that any of us could have a great idea and be listening to the community, but if it starts with the leadership. If the leadership of the town isn't supportive, I was thinking about a metaphor as Greg was talking, and I'm thinking the best metaphor I could just come up with was, it's like zoning processes are like airplane rides. Sometimes they get kind of turbulent, and I don't know about you, but like when every once in a while since I had kids, like sometimes I developed a fear of flying that happens every once in a while, and if you're on the plane and all of a sudden it starts bouncing up and down, I first look to the person next to me, but then I look at the flight attendant, and if the flight attendant looks calm, then I'm calm. And zoning processes are kind of like that. If the leadership of the town stays calm and says, like, we're going to get through this, just hang in there, I'm like, okay, we're going to get through it. And I was blessed in Darien in that, beginning with Yvonne Klein, and then I think it was Dave Campbell and Jamie Stevenson, now John Zagrodsky. We've had really great, strong first select men and women, and there are all those surprises. And zoning directors and zoning commissioners, I've developed a whole new appreciation for their position because it's really hard. You as a developer go and present a project and you think you've thought about everything and laid out a good idea and read the plan of conservation and development and are responding appropriately to it. But once you get in that zoning meeting, I don't know if your experience in different towns has been the same, but I don't find that a lot of positive people show up from the community at zoning meetings. It's usually someone who's really pissed off about something or wants your town to stay in the 1950s. And if you look at that picture up on the right, that's what downtown Darien looked like in 2007. It was a surprise to a lot of people. And what I chose to do, it started with the leadership, but then what I chose to do was, in this case, because it was it wasn't just one building in the downtown, it's like a third of the downtown. And these are strong-willed, very opinionated people, as we find in all towns probably in Connecticut, but I just found community engagement was so important, and articulating the vision. And I went even deeper. I created a website and used to post every meeting. I made it easy for the positive people to understand what was going on and what was being proposed. And then it became kind of a hobby, to be candid. Like, if I read a cool article on walkable communities or pedestrian friendliness or, is retail dead? I was going through this also during the Amazon era of like, we're never going to shop again. We're just going to sit on our iPhones and order from the comforts of our home. I just shared everything I was researching and learning and being confronted with, and I was like a totally open book. My friends in the development community said, this is either going to be a Harvard Business School case study or you're going to end up in Bellevue, one or the other. But I put it out there, and it was worth it to me, and it was my hometown. So it came from a real place of caring. I didn't want to screw it up either. But over time, I found with communication, even the negative people started coming around. And our project's being done in 2 phases. So the first phase opened a couple of years ago. And when that delivered and people could actually see it and walk by it and see the quality of the materials and the tenancy and so on, like they all kind of turned around, and even the negative people became positive. There's still a few negative people. That probably hurts more when you live in the town,
Yeah.
you know, because you maybe even know some of them and you consider them friends. But, you know,
It's exact same. I have exact same experience there.
Yeah. And no, incredibly helpful in painting the picture of why you go into the town. So I want to move into, once you've selected the site, once you've made those leadership connections in the local community, once you're starting to receive broader feedback from the community, and you're also trying to visualize what this will look like, right? And you're doing the architectural designs and figuring out the unimix and things of that nature. Talk us through what has been some lessons learned that are informing your approaches moving forward about how you're effectively navigating the community process and incorporating feedback while also contending with the financial realities that it's difficult to build right now. How are you effectively doing that? What are your constraints? And what are you applying to kind of future projects moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, when we started to design Founder Square, we already had volumetrically what we could do. We knew we wanted it to be right up against the sidewalk to recreate that street wall. But what we decided to do was, you know, it's hard to make, and I think David's done it very well, to make these big buildings that can be longer look natural, right? Because in the old days, you know, all these old town centers, they're built by 1,000 different people, and everyone, you know, built 50, 60, you know, linear feet of facade, and then there's another guy that built the next one, so it looks very varied. And it's a challenge to make these projects look varied. So one thing we did was, because we had a height constraint of 3 floors, you know, we didn't want to build above 3 floors for the front building. Then it wasn't an elevator building, it was a walk-up building. And as a walk-up building, then we actually made it single stair. A lot of, you know, single stair I think is a very, you know, it's something people are discussing a lot now and legalizing it more broadly. But the code does allow for, if you have 4 units per floor and limited to 3 floors, single stairs. So, you know, having 4 separate volumes in the front that was all built as a single building, so we had the efficiency there, but with 4 different entrances at the back, you know, the facades are articulated differently between brick and clapboard and different roof lines. You know, we were able to create something that was really looking back at some of the buildings that were there and were demolished. You know, there were brick buildings, there were clapboard buildings there that were demolished. So, you know, we really looked back towards, you know, what the architecture of the town not only is, but a lot of the people who would oppose these projects, I think, you know, a lot of people in this room will know this, are older, and there's a very strong sense of nostalgia, you know, for how things were. And so, you know, you know, when we had these community outreach events, I would just show pictures, and Patrick was in some of these. I'd show pictures of what some of these buildings were. And you see people's faces, and they're like, oh, I used to shop there. You know, I used to go to that place, and guess what? That place is 3 stories tall, right? That place is 4 stories with an attic. Right? Like, you see these buildings and the development that was there, it's like you're just building what was there. And I think it gets to a point where, you know, in terms of community outreach, and, you know, we tried a lot of different things out on the community, and I was new at this, so I was kind of figuring out myself. I thought, oh, just give them all the new urbanist principles that, you know, we're obsessed with, and then they'll just, you know, how can you disagree with it, right? It's like science. And people are like, no way, that's like, we're not, you know, I don't want any of this anywhere near me. And so the way we sort of short-circuited that was, you know, people hold in their minds 2 separate things. One, they wish things were like it used to be, because they know their downtown is not like it used to be, and they want it to be better, but they don't want it to change. And those 2 things are diametrically opposed to each other. And so the way we short-circuited it was, we are not trying to change the community. We are trying to build more of the community. And if there's change, it's changing back, right? We are changing back. We are going back to a traditional form of development. And when you start saying traditional form of development and going back to it, like, people are like, oh, okay, wait, yeah, the thing that I wish they hadn't demolished, you're going to build something of that scale and maybe that has a similar function? Okay. Like, that gets people over, you know, over a lot of that.
I would say for the Riverfront project and another project that we're building in Naugatuck right now, both have been RFP processes. So early on, we kind of showed an initial kind of snapshot of what the exterior would look like and what the massing would be. And I think that was the initial part of the buy-in. And we had kind of subsequent community meetings where the exterior was not really the kind of, there wasn't a lot of contention on it because we drew a lot from, the architect started early with looking at precedents from architecture in the area. And this is right in the downtown area, and we didn't have that many direct abutters because the river was to one side of us. Eversource kind of power station was the other side of us. So we were lucky in that regard. I think in ways that we engaged the community and were able to kind of make changes was really the population that we're trying to serve. For Torrington Riverfront is a mixed income community, so they're kind of certain units, 80% of the units are income restricted. And we were able to also have a more deeply affordable component that was in partnership with a local service provider that was serving individuals with developmental disabilities. And that was really able to happen because of conversations that were brokered through the city, because we don't know the needs and the kind of organizations in the community as well as the kind of municipal staff or town staff leadership. So I think those partnerships where the conversations are ongoing, it's not really through these zoning meetings where I see the kind of collaboration happening. It's really meetings we have before that with people who are invested in wanting to make this a part of the community and wanting to help shape it. I think that's where we often saw those areas where we could kind of tweak what we're doing here to address what community needs were.
Yeah, I'd echo those comments. I mean, I think for us also, in this, I'm going to kind of keep bringing it back to Main Street. Looking at historical precedent in the town from an architectural point of view was important. In Darien, weirdly, we didn't have, like, if you asked a Darien resident, honestly, like, what part of downtown Darien do you think is architecturally great? They would have, believe it or not, said, none of it's really that great. There were a few older historic buildings on the other side of the downtown that people liked, but they were like two-story, stick-built. One was the old police station, one had become an architect's office. That style building didn't really work so well with what we were trying to do to have we have three-story buildings along the Post Road, at the Boston Post Road, and then three-story buildings along Corbin Drive. And we kind of created a new pedestrian side street, because part of the criticism of the town always from retailers and others that thought about going there was that, it didn't really have a downtown core. The Post Road ran through the town, and then the Metro North train line bisects the Post Road and basically created almost two downtowns. And the walk from one end to the other was really unpleasant. There's like a dip in the road, and you're going under the train trestle, and it's not very well maintained. So that was the challenge. And so we heard that people wanted depth, and the town planner in particular, the zoning director, Jeremy Ginsburg, who's been an incredible partner, collaborator in this whole process. And that's why we ended up doing the project on both sides of Corbin Drive to create something off of the Post Road. And then we have these interior public spaces. One of my partners and I had been, working in the town for about 10 or 15 years before. So she had built two buildings off the Post Road that had this beautiful plaza. But given the initial tenants that she had, it was beautiful but empty all the time. And over time, I'd kind of helped her, once we started partnering together, I helped her re-tenant the property and put a cool coffee shop, like an artisanal coffee shop, and a workout place, like a bar method workout place. And suddenly, mostly women would go to this bar method class, would go work out, get a coffee, sit and linger with friends. And that public place that's beautiful, it's called Grove Street Plaza, if you ever want to look it up. It became super vibrant, and it became a community gathering place. So we wove, I always called it like our laboratory. We kind of wove things that we saw into the design of Corbin so we could point directly to things that happened, and people who were paying attention could relate, and we said, look, you like Grove Street Plaza, what we're going to do in this project is create like 3 of those. So we're going to give you more of what you want in the context of this development. And so that was really important. So having your ear to the ground, and listening, however you get your information, that's like so important. Because I think if people also feel like you're just trying to plop your project in the middle of their downtown and you're really not listening, you're going to struggle. And I get the feeling we all three of us kind of keep our ear to the ground.
Yeah. And, David, great segue for me. On my last question, before I open it up to Q&A, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about storefronts and vacancy a little bit in more detail. I think we've heard about, there's everything from bad actors who, purposely leave storefronts vacant. There's also struggling small businesses who fail to be able, especially without ownership, occupy some of these storefront spaces. We also see new construction, fancy new buildings with these huge main street presences, and they sit vacant for years despite the residential portions being tenanted. So talk us through the developer's perspective on vacancy. I know that commercial also comes in all shapes and sizes, from Windsor to Darien. It's not going to look the same. So what has your experiences been with tenanting commercial spaces successfully, and what do you ensure when you're pursuing a project it's included?
So one interesting thing, so I have a sort of an international perspective, on some of this stuff, and have been in New York and sort of looked into other American city center retail stuff. It's interesting, like usually in a healthy, I call it healthy market, like where these environments are built out and there's pedestrian activity, retail is more valuable than residential, right? Your ground floor is your most valuable space. That is not the case in almost anywhere in Connecticut, right? I mean, I'm not sure there is anywhere in maybe West Hartford Center. Some of the rents are higher than the retail rents, probably. Actually, that's certainly true in parts of it. And the reason is like think of it like people understand malls. Think of a mall. I mean, if like your 3 anchors are vacant, like the rest of it's not going to rent and it's going to collapse, right? I mean, it's similar in our built environment. So, I think part of the problem is that people think, okay, we're in this new mixed use world where mixed use is the zoning, it's the highest and best use, it's the best for the community. But a lot of folks that aren't really focused on retail get into this, right? It's residential developers that now, okay, we're going to put some retail on the ground floor. And that so many times has taken the form of just a giant space, right? It's like, I'm going to put 4,000 square feet of retail, so that's going to be a restaurant, right? Because those are 4,000 square feet, right? And then you have a space that is your lowest rent. You're going to maybe do a podium, and so it's steel, so it's your most expensive space. And it's huge, so it's going to cost someone $500,000 to $1 million to get into that space and build it all out and build the kitchen. And so, it's such a massive bet. And that's not how these places were built, right? They were small bets. That's why they worked out and grew organically. So in Windsor, the last thing we were going to do is build a big restaurant, since at the time there were several restaurant spaces that are vacant, right? So what we did was we kept it to 3 stories, all stick construction. And we wanted the active, retail, and we knew we weren't going to attract and weren't targeting, national retailers or anything. So, it was really like mom and pop stores. We underwrote it accordingly, very low rent space. But the key was, given they were walk-ups, we put residential on the back of the ground floor. And so what you see as like a typical built-out environment of ground floor retail is only, 28 feet deep. And so the units are between 700 square feet and 1,500 square feet. I mean, we wish we had more of the 700 square foot units. We had so much demand for them because rent is lower than $1,000 a month, and you're right on the main street, right? That we actually did, we leased it up immediately, right? We had tenants. When we delivered, we had all of our tenants and already either contracted or, one was still to be contracted. But we had all those. So, and we didn't have to build the expensive steel construction, right? Because it was all stick built. It was only 3 stories. So it wound up being, I think, very successful, and I think it's something we're looking to repeat in other environments too.
Yeah, for us, we're residential developers, so doing retail definitely is not our expertise. But for us, we do see retail on the ground floor as an amenity for the residents. So for when we underwrite them, actually, we underwrite 0 rent for the retail spaces because in our experience, it's taken a while to get tenants into the spaces, and because these are kind of brand new vanilla boxes. We're not going to fit it out because we actually don't know what is the best ideal layout, what kind of tiling they want, what kind of flooring they want. There's a lot of variables that actually the tenant needs to do the fit out. For that reason, we get a broker to kind of broker the site and to market it, and we stay in touch with the kind of economic development director to see if there's any people interested in the space. And the space at the corner of the riverfront is actually a cat cafe right now. And it's done surprisingly well. They actually have a really good TikTok, social media presence, and people come to visit it. I've had people mention it to me, and they're coming from half an hour to an hour away.
You have to have a cat to go there?
No, there are cats there.
Oh, rent a cat.
You can play with a cat, and you can actually adopt a cat.
Gosh, that's not what I thought. Okay, hold on a second.
Cat cafes are a thing.
Wait,
you guys should know this by now.
Start over. Wait, that's a cat. It's a
cafe where there are cats.
The cats live there, right?
They don't live there because at the end of the night they bring them back to
so maybe I don't know
somewhere else.
The model.
But there are cats there that you can hang out with. They're not open every day of the week, but it is a placemaking sort of activity, and we're not looking for the highest rent. And that's the reason why we underwrite zero rent there, is that when there is the right tenant, that we can move them in. But for that reason, we don't build really large retail spaces because we're not underwriting any rent on it, so we can't actually leverage any debt on that space. Because it is very variable. Unless you're in a very vibrant downtown that already has very full kind of retail occupancy, ground floor occupancy, it's really hard to underwrite that rent. And you're going to have to make sure your lender can also underwrite it and will be willing to underwrite it. For us, we think it's a great move to have ground floor activity as an amenity for our residents, but it is definitely not really fully in our wheelhouse sometimes, and we're trying to grow that capacity and have in-house capacity to kind of make sure all our retail spaces are well kind of serviced for our kind of business owners. But it definitely is a challenge, but we sometimes see really great outcomes, like we're seeing kind of a 5-minute, 10-minute walk from here.
So, again, my experience is a little different. Darien is definitely an anomaly compared to many towns in Connecticut in that we had a pretty fairly vibrant downtown. It was definitely not considered by retailers to be one of the best downtowns. We're in the middle of Greenwich, New Canaan, and Westport, all of which are very well established. They all had kind of gone, like from when I was a kid, as like mom and pop stores on the street, to, in the case of Greenwich, national stores, now international stores, international retailers. Westport went, local to national predominantly. New Canaan went local to national. And in Darien, again, I'm bringing it back to Connecticut Main Street, there's a big emphasis in our conversations around, preserving local retail, locally owned retail. And so, we made a commitment to, and our rents are higher. I mean, our retail rents the retail spaces do have value. The rents are higher than the apartment rents and not higher than the office rents now, but, so we made a commitment to the town to not dislocate the existing retailers. So we gave everybody an option to stay in the project at a rent that worked, that wasn't that far off what they had been paying. If we couldn't accommodate them, we relocated them to other places. We found places for people. And then there were a few stores that, to be candid, like, not to sound cold-hearted, but they weren't really working that well. And it was just a matter of time before they closed. And so we did have a couple of hard conversations where being local hurt, like what happened to, what was it called? Baubles, this little pennyweight jewelry kind of company. We worked with those retailers, and I would say I had gone deep. I knew nothing about this business, honestly, 25 years ago. I knew nothing about placemaking, And so I'm a curious person, and so I went really deep on the best mixed-use places around the country and studied all of them, visited many of them. And, I was particularly struck by a place in Los Angeles called The Platform in Culver City, California, that these young retail brokers, actually, who wanted to become developers, built. And it was in a new area. There was a new train line installed in that area, a train stop across from this site that was, I think, a couple of car dealers. And they were retail brokers, and so they came up with this idea of building a very cool complex, retail, apartments above. There's one small office building. And they really curated the mix of stores well, and they created this little island of cool. They had a Sweet Green, an artisanal butcher, Soul Cycle. This is 10 years ago when Soul Cycle was super hot. And, they nailed it, and they got the first floor so right that everybody wanted to live there. Everybody that could live there wanted to live in that building. And so it massively outperformed expectations. They probably discounted the retail because it was an untested market, so they were careful. It really, your underwriting is so important. But that drove the apartment rents to a level that was probably 40% higher than the market. And that made the economics of the project work. So I was candidly kind of inspired by that. And that's why I went super deep on the retail and curating this mix right. And that became my pitch to retailers. I was like, well, you can go to Greenwich or Westport and open up there, but there's 100 landlords in that downtown, and you have no way of knowing who's gonna open up. Let's just pick an extreme, like a donut shop. You open up this great donut shop on Main Street in Westport. Not that they could afford that rent, but theoretically. And some landlord 6 doors down rents to another donut shop, and your sales go down by 40%. We'll not do that to you. We'll commit to it legally, and we'll commit to it, with a handshake. We won't do that to you. And so we're going to create this highly curated mix of stores that'll really drive things. But I think, again, Darien is a little bit of an anomaly in a lot of towns in Connecticut. I mean, that's one thing I would caution zoning people to be careful of. It's so hyped up. We want mixed use, we want mixed use. You have to be careful because you don't want empty storefronts. Yeah. And you can't protect yourselves against the risk that developers less careful than my colleagues to the right here, underwrite wrongly, and then you have empty storefronts that make the area just feel like a failure.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing.
We only have 4 minutes left, so I want to pass it to Q&A because I also know we're the panel before lunch. So.
I see a question in the back.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tommy Boston. I'm with VHB. I'm an urban planner, urban designer, and community engagement specialist working in downtown revitalization and redevelopment planning. First and foremost, thank you so much for participating in this panel. I had to write this question down, so apologies. I'm going to look at my phone for this one. We're working with a small town. You may be able to put some of the pieces together as I describe it more. Along the Connecticut River, have completed a concept planning, market analysis, identified site and infrastructure constraints, and have the community support behind us. But our concept plan reflects the real site constraints with compact building areas and height limits near a historic structure. So given those limitations, where does the math for you all start to sort of break down? And what would need to be true about this site, whether it's financing tools, development bonuses, or phasing to sort of make the numbers pencil?
Greg.
Sorry, loaded question.
You're on the Connecticut River.
Yeah. So there is existing structures there, you're saying?
Yes, it's a brownfield, so we're working on the brownfield site assessment, trying to check off all the boxes before we kind of go to soft market testing with the development community.
Yeah. So we have a project in Enfield that closing in 4 weeks, where we got we availed ourselves of the new CMDA loan program. But before that, we got a brownfield grant. So I think number one thing is getting, doing your environmental site assessments, getting a full view of what the cost of remediation, putting together a remedial action plan, which sometimes you can get public funds for that. In the case of Enfield, the town of Enfield had pursued, those studies with a grant from DECD. I mean, that program, I don't know if anyone's following. They're very good on social media, so you can see just how many, of these projects are really getting done. I mean, there is a lot of money for brownfields, right? 2 years ago, it was increased from $2 to $4 million. Now it's increased to $6 million. $6 million, I think people, it was said earlier, a lot of people think of environmental remediation as just this black box. So it's like, oh, that's like tens of millions of dollars, so forget about it. Like, that's not what it is, especially now that we're in the post-Transfer Act world in Connecticut. I mean, you only have to remove the hottest stuff, right? There is capping, there is other things. You can add clean fill on top of certain dirty fills, and have a completely safe site. So I think the first thing is getting a handle, finding, if available, public funds, to get a handle on what needs to be done, and then applying to the state's brownfield. For our state brownfield award, they're going to want to know what you're going to do with the site. So it's not just clean it up and then we'll figure it out. So putting together at least, a preliminary plan there. But I mean, that program, our partners have used it several times now, and we're using it. At least I'm using it for the first time at Enfield.
Maybe here I'll do a pitch for Natalie with CMDA, and maybe they have some technical assistance that can help with also thinking through with the brownfield, what would you want to see on the site, like at what scale? I think that will impact a lot who is the right partner for you, whether it's 5 to 12 units or whether it's 60 or more units. I don't know how large the site is, but I think thinking about what scale you're looking for and what type of housing you're looking for, whether it's ownership or rental, will have impact on who is the right partner. I think ultimately the town can only do so much, and you'll need to get a partner on board to help deliver on kind of the eventual vision, and getting the partner on earlier rather than later will kind of make everything hopefully a lot more streamlined and easier.
Time for one more.
Hello, Lauren Coakley-Vincent from downtown Bridgeport. I'm thrilled to see, and just speaking from a place where we have fabulous access to multiple modes of transportation. But I'm very pleased to see what does not appear to be massive parking lots on any of these after pictures. I was wondering, as developers, do you either proactively get involved in advocacy or get brought into advocacy around investments in public transportation for your multi-use, looking like less car-dependent project sites?
I mean, it's noon, and this is we're 4 hours into this conference. This is the first time parking has come up.
Shocking.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Yes, right? So the first thing we did in Windsor was to appeal to, we asked to change the zoning to lower the parking count. I mean, people, parking is the most important thing, right, to figure out, because it is the thing that most people get animated about, right? So I say on the parking front, in downtowns, people live more parking light, right? And in these sites, the density is such that you must build to the lowest possible parking ratio. You'll get questions of, what if someone has 3 cars? They're going to go rent somewhere else, right? It's the center. It was something that for us, if we added 2 parking spaces in Windsor, it would have chopped 1 column of 6 units off. And so 2 parking spaces, 6 units, I mean, that's insane, right? That's crazy. That's the value proposition of just building lower parking. Parking is the thing that we most need to figure out first. Second, in the transit, I mean, we're advocating for the CT Fast Track East as part of this Manchester project. Our project was built around the idea of not just enhancing the existing transit, but bringing new mass transit options to Main Street in Manchester.
I haven't had enough time to be totally candid to advocate broadly, but I intend to. Our company's growing, and I'm getting kind of freed up from being in the weeds all the time, as I've been for the last 20 years. But I agree, we spend a lot of time going through parking. For this Corbin project, we built 250 underground parking spaces that sit 6 feet in the water. It's a waterproofed garage. It is a very expensive garage. There's a 350 space structured parking garage. The town, when we were going to zoning, basically said, you need to assume that you will not borrow any municipal parking in the context of this. Whatever you're creating, you have to provide sufficient parking. So we spent a lot of time on that. And I'm really hoping that when it's all done and it's open, number one, I'm hoping most importantly that it works. That's a joke. Number two, I'm hoping it becomes a model, like an actual model where for people who were so scared of mixed-use transformational developments in their downtown, they can come look at this and say, wow, that's kind of stitched into the town pretty nicely. And what I now see with the first phase being done, my office sits across from the parking entrance for the first phase. There's no traffic. Like the people who live in these apartments, two out of 38 do not even have cars. Most of them never touch their cars. They walk to Whole Foods, they walk to restaurants, cafes, or the train. So I suspect, and I've been threatening to do this, and I'm a little scared to do it because I don't want to get caught with egg on my face, but I suspect that if we did like what I think might be the first post-mortem parking study, if we actually put a counter on the entrance and track the cars, I'm highly confident it's going to show that the parking demand, the traffic generated is substantially less than whatever the ITE manual said. That was like the Bible for the zoning hearing. I got to do this because I've now said it like 3 or 4 times in public places, but I'm a little scared to be honest. But I'm 95% confident I'm right. People are walking. They're doing what we hoped they would do, and they love it.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause for our panelists and moderator.